Hey folks, welcome back to another video. This is a fun, unplanned one, and the reason being is I'm not always keeping up with VRs and stuff at the moment, and then I sort of feel like I'm too late to join. Just in terms of people's interest has flown by. Like I often say over here, a lot of my more informative, I don't really want to call it educational. I feel like these videos are informative, but a lot more of my practice either gets shared on Instagram, on Patreon, or I discuss a lot more of it in some of the live chats that I've been doing, especially the one that I did with 𝗵𝗁𝗄𝗃 recently, so check that out. I discussed my practice on the 𝗬𝘬𝗃𝗃 Tarot podcast when we were talking about the Brady Tarot. So practice stuff is inherently interwoven in these discussions, but this is also meant to be a fun one. Fun, informative, especially if you have one or both of these decks or you've ever been curious about them. Hopefully this video will be the one for you. As you can see, it is the Winterseer Animal Oracle and the Hedgewitch Botanical Oracle, and they are both by Siolo Thompson. Hopefully I've pronounced her name correctly. I've heard it a few ways. I really want to show you it as a mega deck because that is how I use it, and that's what's bringing me joy. I've done a lot of discussions about curating decks, especially the Memento Mori, which I've discussed once on Instagram. Once I took everyone through it more recently on Patreon. So yeah, creating, curating, whatever you want to call it, decks is something that I do enjoy. Predominantly Oracle. I can't imagine ever doing it with a tarot other than when you get a choice of cards, of course, like there's a couple of lovers to pick from or a couple of devils. So yeah, whilst I don't mod decks really, I have done, it's been years, that's not my thing. This kind of curating or just mashing together is something that's fun, but I've gathered together some notes and thought about some of the things that you might be curious to know when putting these two decks together, if that's something that you're going to try. Let's talk first though, briefly about the guidebooks. I say briefly, we'll see. I'm pretty familiar with both of them now, and I believe they're a valuable resource worth mentioning, which feels like a nice change of pace. Llewellyn's guidebooks and boxes often receive a lot of attention to detail in like the material quality, and I feel that sometimes the cards don't always meet the same standard, and I appreciate that is depending on the finish and the year they were printed and all of those things, and my preference. But some cards historically are very flexible and durable while others are not. Then when I've come to some of the guidebooks and they haven't felt like they've offered something in particular, but they're all glossy and really well finished and have all these colourful pictures, it then feels a little wasteful for me. So it's really nice to see that yes, these guidebooks are really well designed, and in this case they don't feel like a waste. I would extend that to less experienced Oracle readers as well as the more experienced and those familiar with these themes. They feel like they're going to offer something in my humble opinion. Let's talk about this one first because it was the first out. And I believe when I turned it over and looked inside, I actually have like the 6th printing. Llewellyn have really been doing well with this one to be on the 6th printing. But anyway, the plant book itself, and I suppose I can flick through some of the inside. I don't want to give away everything, but I really want to talk about it. It identifies itself as a Hedgewitch grimoire, which is probably a given. Here's the contents. It's there. The guide includes information on things like where to find the plants, how to identify them, their medicinal, edible or magical uses, Another thing is it also shares some folklore and discusses foraging and safety precautions. Let's see if I can find, here we go, foraging and safety precautions. Even though this discussion is quite brief, it carries on a little bit to the next side. It's very clear and it covers key points for foraging safely and ethically, very much considering things like the honourable harvest, so to speak. And the book does emphasise that it shouldn't be the only source of information and encourages readers to pursue further studies or tutoring if they're unfamiliar with this, especially if you're foraging plants. Be sensible is essentially the essence before you dive into them. I particularly enjoyed the book's inclusion of information as well about animals, tarot and other associations to the plants. Spoiler, you may see already the mention of bear in this one. I mean, kind of a given because it says bearberry. But bears are linked to many plants throughout this, or at least a reasonable handful, and that's because they eat all of them. So I really love that. Other associations have included tarot cards, which felt like a fun and thoughtful addition because this creator has made at least 2 tarot decks and I think a Lenormand. I don't know if the creator's always been the author as well as the artist to all of those, but anyway. And honestly, plant-wise, I do feel like I learned a lot from this book in particular, probably because my knowledge about plants is far more limited, but also because of the book's layout and approach as a field guide. So yeah, I've flicked through one, but here you go. You've got the keyword, you've got what I believe is the scientific name as well. We've got the other names down here that the plant might be known as, the message. There's often these beautiful additional illustrations, which I really love. I love the extras. I'm very appreciative of that. And again, at the end, the other names are repeated and then the oracle words repeated. The way that this lays out itself feels very, very well structured throughout. And it is a really, really beautiful book. And then you get into the back, and again, I don't want to give away all of her recipes, but you do get into recipes. Here we go. Additional recipes, thing to make for spring, and then it breaks them down seasonally. So yeah, very, very, very cool. Additional note is that the font is slightly bigger and bolder in this one, which I would imagine is most people's preference. I can give you an example really quickly. I'm not sure how well that's going to show up on screen or not. It's slight, but it is noticeable enough. So yeah, other note, otherwise both the books have the same sort of treatment. Moving into the animal book, it initially specifies a focus on Celtic and Norse paganism, but then it goes on to expand and include other folklore and cultural influences such as Slavic folklore. There's mentions of Druidry and Wicca, just to name a few of the many things, but everything is named, which is appreciated. Also, there's a discussion of why, whilst in the plants, there's some Native American discussion in it. In the animals, for the most part, the folklore and anything taken from the various tribes and cultures is specifically not mentioned because it's not the author's own, and there's a bit of a breakdown about the why in this as well. Let's get you the contents page again. Here we go. And this one is the first edition printing, and the reason I bring your attention to that is what I'm going to say about the cards when we get into those. So let's move and shift past all of this and get into some meanings. So again, you've got lovely replicas of what's on the card, which I do enjoy. I don't feel like I need it, but I do enjoy it as long as I feel like the book is giving me something of value and that the deck is at least hardy enough to last some use. So this one hits mostly those points for me. So here you can see we've got badger, we've got keywords That's one of the definitive differences, which I was going to get into with the cards, but I suppose it makes sense to talk about it now, is that you've got badger, you've not got the scientific name, but then instead of other terms or anything like that, we get into a variety of keywords. So it always starts with the one that's actually on the card, which for badger is dig. Then it breaks down into a host of other meanings, and you get information about badger overall, some of which could still really infuse a reading, and then you get into the reading part, which is the very divinatory led portion. It presents, I feel like, a fair amount of facts that also contribute to a more positive approach to animal education, sometimes dispelling myths that historically have harmed animals as well. Additionally, it offers a good inclusion of historic ties and the folklore, which when they're all brought together, it really feels like it complements my approach to animal gnosis, if you are familiar with my practice at all. I've also noticed that sometimes there are species specifics about animals, such as specifying the bee as honeybee. So they are here somewhere. It goes straight in, the honeybee. The reason that I appreciate that is the species differ greatly. So honeybees are part of a hive. Well, a lot of bees are solitary by nature, and so the way that they exist is quite different, and so it's not minor nuances in this instance. Whereas if we go back to bear, it takes a more collective approach, focusing on bears' similarities, I assume, overall, but that works wonderfully too. So you do sort of notice the back and forth between those. I jumped onto this one because I wanted to talk about it as well, but just because it's more of a nuanced thing depending on where you live. So this is blackbird, and in my region, blackbird isn't commonly used in the way that the book describes. So what's depicted here is a starling. Now, the book does explain some of this, and it makes sense to where the author's based, so it's not a critique at all, more a commentary, because it initially threw me as I immediately recognised this as a starling and not a blackbird. Whereas where I live, the only bird that we refer to as a blackbird here is the European blackbird, which is also known as a common thrush. There seems to be a use of blackbird elsewhere, which is very, very species varied. And like I say, you get a little art note on this one in particular. As far as I'm aware, this is the only time that happens. I don't want to flick through too many more because, like I said, I don't want to give away everything, but one minor thing that I noticed is that the format in this book differs stylistically a little bit more. So the Hedgewitch feels a little bit more cohesive in what's mentioned in every single one. The bit that caught me on this is that, and it's really not a major issue, at the end of some of the sections it mentions a specific negative aspect. That's the key term that it uses. So it says the negative aspect and then goes on to discuss sort of something that you might consider as a reversal or a blockage or a challenging part of the animal, whereas others, those similar things are not directly included. Sometimes not at all. Sometimes you could still kind of pull that from some of what you're reading. But because the term negative aspect is included in a significant amount of these enough, it just felt a little bit unusual, I suppose. It gave then a feeling that some animals had a slightly more challenging slant than others. And then the only other thing I really noticed was occasionally certain animals felt a little bit more humanised, as if they had feelings about other animals or human behaviour, sort of in the way as if you were to say, oh, boar, so boar people. And the only thing that I can expand upon sort of quickly is to say that this reminds me of Ted Andrews' approach to animal totems when people identify with themselves as a particular animal. I honestly struggle with that over-identification when working with animals, but again, very minor point, very particular to me. Overall, I would say the book's content feels pretty solid, especially for beginners, but it has enough depth to engage with those who are well versed, in my humble opinion. And I am really enjoying dipping into both from time to time. I have a particular fondness for animals, as it's within my area of, study, experience and interest. So I have talked about this one a tiny bit more, and I noticed a few more things. I feel like that's just going to be a given, but I really appreciated the space as well, made for similarities in behaviour and folklore between animals. So a great example in the book is crane and heron. They have different keywords, and within the meanings there are some subtle nuances and some significant ones, but they also don't deny those shared elements, and I think that's really pinnacle for me. A lot of decks don't do that and don't discuss that. So as far as the books go, overall, most, if not all, guidebook write-ups contain something that resonates with me. And again, it could be anything from kind of medicinal properties, folklore, behaviour, or the historical connection between the plant or animal and humans. Reading about plants also often leads me to learn something new in an easily understandable way, which is a mega bonus as well. So yeah, I'm actually, like I said, really enjoying dipping into these from time to time. I don't need them. I very much can work with the deck, even not knowing plants in the same level of familiarity with animals, or that I have with animals rather. The keywords are, great. They're easy to just roll with for me. I've been working with Oracle and Tarot for a very long time now, but I'm appreciative of these editions. So yeah, I wanted to have a little moment with them, and let's get into the mega deck. Here is said mega deck. And why create a mega deck, you ask? Hopefully. Aside from the pure enjoyment, I am more likely to use both this way. And additionally, the combination feels like more of an extensive exploration of nature. So I like that it branches out from being just one thing. Also, I have so many animal decks already that are just animals. So yeah, I like the mixture. Perhaps we will talk about their differences very quickly. As you can see, different backs. Which I feel like is very helpful if you want to separate them out again. Let's spin them over so you can see here we've got some differences in the title and keyword layout, the font styles, that kind of thing. Again, here we've got the name of the plant and the scientific name, then the keyword. Here we've got the name of the bird and then the keyword. I would have loved if they'd have had the same font, just because I would have. But it doesn't bother me at all. It has not led me to any issues. They were never meant to be together. I feel like there's great potential for it, which is why I'm here, but they weren't made to be used in one deck. We can just go on to the similarities, and you can see, of course, white space, art style, very, very cohesive. I honestly really, really love that. It also makes her artwork very, very recognisable. And in my instance, the cardstock type, including the finish and size, is exactly the same. I mean, the way that they're rounded is almost perfect, to be fair. But as I say, I got these at the same time. So whilst I got the first edition printing of this, I got, I believe, the 6th edition of this. And it's that really shiny cardstock. It's lovely and flexible. It shuffles really easily. It also comes a bit chippy around the edges, but the white space means that that's also not noticeable. So yeah, it makes for a very grand chonker, but manageable for me, perhaps because of all of my time with Memento Mori, which I think at any given time I have at least 110 cards in my working deck. These together, they create a 96 card deck, so 56 animals and 40 plants. One of the things that I did with this, just in case you were curious, is I went through based on all of the keywords, and I found 9 that have repeating or almost repeating words between the plants and animal cards. to be quite frank, this doesn't bother me at all. Firstly, like I say, they wasn't meant to be one deck. Secondly, repeating words can enhance a message for me by offering different layers and also really pushing the message home. I don't mind having both versions in the deck either. I won't be taking one or the other out because of those nuances, and because I often use decks that include repeating keywords such as fallen angels, which I think I've said many a time has danger in at least like 6 of the cards. But I did pull them out for you. So we have blackberry and bat, which we've got adaption or adapt. We've got cattail and beaver for build. Caution for wormwood and doe. Defend for dogwood and crab. Humility for dandelion and wren. Mystery for ghostpipe and eel. Ghostpipe was certainly a mystery to me because I hadn't heard of ghostpipe. Patience for trout lily and heron. Protection for rowan and goose. Oh, well, goose has protect, sorry. That's the other one that's slightly a little more different. And then we have strength, which is the last one for bear and bearberry, which of course there is an obvious connection between these two. So that for me makes a lot of sense in that regard. I have zero complaints, but I thought I would show you. So out of the whole entire deck, and the rest aren't in alphabetical order of the keywords or anything, we still have all of these cards left that don't have repeats either. I'm wondering whether to quickly take you through the cards, and I'm just going to show you a couple actually, because I thought that I would get into showing you some pairings, because that's something that I'm really enjoying at the moment. It's another reason why I feel like I would use this deck more regularly, because I'm very familiar with animal energy. I'm less familiar with plant. I wanted to explore and integrate plant energy for the longest time. I do prefer those that are local to me or I'm going to more likely use. Also, I wanted keywords, and the reason being is for that lack of familiarity. I still wanted to be able to bounce off of something. So I've gotten rid of any plant decks I had, I think. Yeah, I believe so, because either the keywords on them weren't to do with that same kind of field guide, medicinal, witchy, edible kind of layers that this is, or they just didn't have the keywords. So like the druid plant, sorry, I was losing my voice, which, to be fair with the druid plant oracle, sorry, it's got a cracking book, and there are ways to discern some of the layers of the message from the artwork, but it just wasn't getting used, and it wasn't doing it for me, and I didn't know that I would get this. And it's the having it in with the animal oracle that's, like I said, it fleshes it out. I mean, there's many other things beyond this. There's the elements, there's other human beings, of course, there's the spirits. But in terms of like direct, tangible, some of my main focuses in my practice, when I'm out doing a lot of my observational animal stuff, it's directly in relation to various plants, trees, and things of that nature. Also, some of the plants that these animals are connected to are discussed, as far as memory serves me, and vice versa. So again, bringing them together just feels like a luscious offering. Also, 40 cards for an oracle for me is slightly too small. I know, I'm greedy. I'm just going to own it. I'm not going to feel bad about it. I do love like a 50 card or up, preferably, but I don't need to worry about it because, as I say, I have both. And I feel like there's a really nice variety of keywords in this again. When I use the word neutral, what I mean is a lot of these keywords to me have the capacity to go into so many different directions. They're really not too kind of forceful or boxed in. Sometimes you get that a little bit more with when something has sort of a key phrase, which I like, but it's a completely different flavour. And of course, some of them are going to have heavier sort of meanings or insights or challenges than others. For Badger, for example, are you digging yourself a hole in like not a helpful way? Or are you digging into safety, digging into treasure, you know, rooting into your home, being grounded? There are so many avenues for that, especially when you're comfortable with it. One of the things that the creator talks about is, whilst the books are her initial offering and insights and what sort of sparked the choices and where they come from, which I love that, the where they come from and the why. I really respect that about these decks and I'm very appreciative of it. But it also says, you know, go where you want to go, honour your own gnosis, honour your own experience, honour what you see in the animals and all of that good stuff. And for the most part, not always, especially not with the plants, and again, not always with the animals, they are animals that and sometimes plants that I have access to either natively or, you know, they've been brought over and they're sold here or established here in regards to plants. Or they're animals that I'm otherwise familiar with anyway, like raccoons. I'm not rocking up and bumping into raccoons. Unfortunately, I'm sad about it, I am, but I am also very, very familiar with them. Magpies I see daily. Currently, our juveniles have actually left the nest, which you don't often see juvenile magpies until they're almost adult size. So if you're not sort of practiced or it's too far away, it's not always easy to tell, but they look really scruffy around the neck and head. The head sort of look a little bit disproportionate, I think mostly because the feathers haven't fully come in yet. They've got like white flecks around here and stuff still. But anyway, I've been witnessing magpies a lot, so that's something again that it brings me a lot of joy. I do work with juniper quite a bit in my workings. These are things that I can really have that familiarity with and connection. And to be honest, if I really wanted to, which I haven't yet, but if I wanted to, we get various newts and things. The sort of folklore and the properties is quite shared across those. They're not something that I commonly come into contact with. I don't remember the last time I saw any kind of newt. Salamanders aren't always newts. And there are differences. This is another one of those examples where I was referring to the use of salamander as an entire grouping, whereas you can really get into the specifics of them. So yeah, newts are part of the salamander family. But the ones that we have here, at least, are semi-aquatic. So not the one pictured, as I say. I could, if I wanted to, take out those things. And because so much of this deck is familiar to me, both between the plants and the animals, and when I say familiar, I might not know all of the medicinal properties of nettle, but I am very familiar with nettles and being stung by them, if not anything else. Also, nettle tea. So I could go through the deck and then really, because I've got all of that selection, cater it and make even more of a specific working deck for myself, which is essentially what I do with Memento Mori, although I continuously curate and adapt that sort of every 6 months to a year to reflect the movements of my practice and any new cards that have come into the deck as well. I think we're going to move into some pairings. What I have here is actually... well, if we're going to call this one deck, which we are for this purpose, I've got two other decks, which are also Llewellyn, so big shout out to them. They are making me happy at the moment. I mean, these aren't all new, but I've just got a lot of love for them at the moment, and this is very, very new. So actually what I have here is both of Julia Jeffrey's decks. This side is Tower of the Hidden Realms, which was her first, and this one is Witch Sister, which was her newest. I am quite happy to use just one of these with this, but they both go so well, and because I've been getting to know 𝗕ecie 𝗺𝗃, I just decided to have a play around with all three, and honestly I've been really enjoying it. People are saying that they feel like they're quite hard readings because of the energies of these two decks, but I don't know. I feel like, in fact, I'm going to move these up just a tad because I'm going to have to pull cards out, obviously. I feel like they work, all three of them. And what you'll notice is a lot of the decks that I pair with this are not decks that use this kind of white space, but it just works. It works well for them. I do have at least one that uses some white space, but for the most part I'm using colourful decks. I will start flicking through in a second, but I will say there is some element of the artwork complementing each other as well as the themes. I tend to go for the energy, but I do like some kind of artistic, I suppose, connection, and I feel that through these three. I'm not sure why, because as I say, this artist is different to this one. There's something about, I guess, the softness of the colours. They both give me a watercolour-y vibe at points, even if that's not the medium. But anyway, it's and also a lot of, I mean, the 𝗕ecie 𝗺𝗃 isn't a Fae deck, it's a 𝗕cie deck, but there's definitely 𝗕cie or Fae connections that I'm feeling the most drawn to using with this one in particular. So yeah, the Hierophant, 𝗬𝗏 and the 5 of Stones. Oof. I do like chamomile for, and again, I wouldn't necessarily read the 𝗕cie 𝗺𝗃 traditionally, but it did very quickly make me think 5 of Pentacles, what I have going on in my body. Usually I feel like I'm in the 5 of Pentacles a lot. I probably over-identify with that card from a health perspective and chronic illness. Chamomile is very soothing for me. I'm not always using it for the soothing of health stuff per se, but definitely sort of mentally, emotionally. Oh, look at these two together as well. Like, we're obviously here for this deck, but I'm having a whole moment with these decks together, whether it's paired or as a trio. Restlessness within the Chariot and the Wheel of Fortune. I know that they're renamed, but I'm just trying to help people out with those. And I love that especially the Wagtail is looking, they're looking to the desire of wanting to charge ahead, which is something that comes up for me. And maybe some of the more competitive or at least very driven layers to the Chariot card, and perhaps having to be a little bit more mindful, because the way that we navigate the Wheel of Fortune, for me, it's not, I know a lot of people talk about it being inherently good fortune. That's not quite how I see the Wheel of Fortune in its entirety. And so I feel like when the wheel is in motion, there's that apprehension as well, and there's that sort of straying from centre and getting caught into the spinning of everything, rather than being like, this individual is very rooted in the process, but sometimes it's easy for that not to happen, and so it's like spinning out, and that's where the restlessness comes from. And the Chariot would just full steam ahead, but I'm not sure how necessarily successful that is, to do that and be kind of shedding those layers of yourself from before as well, without being kind of mindful. So yeah, and again, the restlessness, not only are these two looking at each other, but we've got some colour oh, I can't think of the word, they're the same. Oh, interesting. 2 2s, 2 of Stones, 2 of Wands, and Desire. I can see that for the 2. Interestingly as well, because the snake, I know the infinity symbol is something very, very different, but when I look at it, I always think of the 2 hoops, and it gives me that sort of cyclical back and forth, which is something that I feel comes up in the 2s. There's a spiralic or a cyclical nature and a desire to bring together, but to create some semblance of, you know, I suppose the early phases of balance, but not balance in that perfect kind of scales way, but having more than one thing, one concept, one idea, one something going on, and the melding of those. I'm probably speaking rubbish, but I like to speak rubbish when we're looking through our pairings. Strength, Purifier, and the Two of Waters, which water is very much, at least in many sort of layers of witchcraft, I feel like, called upon for purification as one of the many associations and properties that water can have. So I really love that for the two. And then strength being a very heart-centered place as well, how we can purify in a way that's sort of not to rid of, but to be more compassionate or courageous. So perhaps like these are the things that we could do to help really lean into strength, or the things that will strengthen our resolve, our movement forwards. Look at all of the fiery red in these three as well. Like, I'm not going to talk about all of them because I've got quite a few pairings. And then again, look at this. So we've got the glorious red in the Ten of Wands. Then the rooster has these red accents. And then, of course, we've got the red auburn rich hair of the Maid of Trees. The trees are actually the wand suit. So we have two wands here as well. And the maid, if I'm remembering correctly, is the page. So 10 to page through pride. It feels very thematically on point. Oh, we have the page of the other one. Dream, and the Maid of Water, so again the page. One more, let's see what we got. We got the Knight of Wands, Loyalty, and the Ten of Water. And again, I'm not doing full reading, so I'm sure I'd have much more to say and much more to think about if I actually had some context. But what do you think? What do you think about using these two together as well, just as a side question? Because when I showed them the other day, people were like, ooh, that's a lot of energy, but I'm enjoying it. This is the Victorian Fairy Tarot, and I've kept this layout just because this is actually how I would read with them. I do prefer at least the two tarot cards just to add a little bit more, because it is a very, not just visually spacious, but with just the one keyword. Unless I was using a particularly energetically busy kind of tarot deck or doing a reading where I really wanted to pair back, usually I'm looking at least two tarot cards. So yeah, we're giving that a go. And we've got the Fool, Freedom, and the King of Winter. I feel like if the wolf was going to be the king of something, it would be the King of Winter, which is the King of Swords. And with wolves, you have the whole communicational layer. So I really love that coming in. Also the blue throughout them, because we know I cannot do this without having a colour moment. And then the Freedom of the Fool. Because if there's one thing that I can say about the King of Swords is that that's probably a layer that's missing. Is that once we get into the kings, especially, I don't know, maybe some of the queen, but actually it doesn't feel that much. The king feels ever so slightly more boxed into me across the board. There's something about getting to that point where it's really comfortable and really familiar, but also incredibly structured. Maybe people would disagree with me, or disciplined, or just something that whilst it can be free, there is a lot of forethought into it, and perhaps in the more reversed, blocked aspects of the kings. So there's a kind of discussion here for me, at least, like how can we utilise all that we hold in this king and still move and communicate with some level of freedom. These two first. You can tell I don't usually do it this way. And then we've got the 8 of Spring, Sustain, and then the King of Summer. The Spring is the Wands and the Summer is the Cups. They both just, because they're seasonal, which makes sense to me, you've got these really rich warm colours, and so it just, yeah, it escaped my brain. It happens. So we've got the 8 of Wands, which now I look at it and I'm like, of course it is the bow and arrow, Tegan, the bow and arrow. Interesting, the idea of sustain, because that 8 in particular feels like sometimes with a Rider-Waite-Smith lean, it's trying to move faster than some of the other 8s. And when I think more to the numerology, that is more of a it's more of a process than just a decision. I mean, inherently with a decision comes a process, but you get what I mean? One seems to focus on something being very rapid, and there's something that makes me think about to sustain this direction, where again we're leaning into that King of Cups council, as it were, which I've always identified the King of Cups as particularly that sort of like therapeutic element. So yeah, so here we've got the Empress, strategy, and the Hanged Fairy, which they definitely going to need to gather some strategy to get out of this spider web. And what looks like, so they're stuck in between a spider web surrounded by poppies, which is just a beautiful moment. And again, the colour in itself is really speaking to me of, I would lean into the fact that not only by the keywords and the influences, so the intuitional aspect of my reading, but also the colour and the fact that the yellow's in these two, it feels like there's something within the Empress that I can strategically use to help me while I'm going through the suspension that occurs in the Hanged one. That's just a very stylistic, you know, way of working with this, of course. So we've got the Three of Swords, Ten of Wands, and Change. It's funny because at first I looked at this and I was like, well, it's quite nice for the Three of Swords. And then I realised down here we've got some gossip fuckery going on by the looks of things. So not my favourite kind of communication, although we've all participated in it, let's be honest. And the changing of this and how that could show up in the, it's not the one, sorry. Again, I've been distracted by the colour. I should know that this is the Ten of Pentacles because look at how wholesome it is. And there's something about moving from this space in the Three of Swords that's going to allow us to root into more of the, I don't want to say the finer things, although this is just very much what this is giving me, but like wholesome, sometimes the fuckery that goes on with the mind, or just the way that we're communicating in the three, and how we communicate hurt in particular, which I think is why sometimes it's confused with like just being entirely emotional. But of course our emotions interact with our mind and our thoughts and vice versa. The change in this allows us to have one of those moments where we experience some of the other stuff that's going on in and around us. And certainly one of the really interesting things that happens, and it shows up a lot in therapy, is that there's kind of this outside expectation that when everything's going really well and things are wholesome and wonderful, like I said, that we feel good. And if we feel good, we're thinking, I don't want to say good, but like thinking healthily, thinking well. And actually many people, especially if they've had some kind of trauma or they're going through a difficult period of time, or they have things like anxiety, actually being in this really wholesome Ten of Pentacles, in whatever way it's showing up for us, it can lead into those challenging thoughts about how it will feel when it goes away. What if? And so it's about changing the dynamics between the two as well, I feel, and how we communicate that, which Blackbird or Starling, very communicative songbirds. So yeah, their little chattering makes me think of that. So I think that's enough for that one because I'll just get carried away otherwise. So let's move on to the next pairing. Next we have the Wild Unknown Tarot, and this is a tester pairing. We've got Daughter of Cups, Magic, and then the Eight of Swords. There is some sort of precarious position about this chrysalis, and they are particularly vulnerable in chrysalis because whilst it does protect them in some ways, it's not a certainty. They're not even certain to get through the process of it. When I think about moving that into myself, you know, that heartfelt experimentation and sort of trying to intuit through a new experience and moving away from one space and hopefully into another, there's a certain experimentation and attempt at alchemy that comes into that, which is what makes me think of the magic. And we've got like the blues and yellows here, and then the reds mirroring each other. Not that that's important, but I just noticed. I did something with this deck as well, so you might see a few butterflies or butterfly adjacent phases back to back. I can't remember how many there are. I'm really loving this for the Four of Cups and bravery, and then we've just gone from the chrysalis to and in this wands one, they look more like a thicket, you know, rising as the butterfly and the Six of Wands, which feels, you know, incredibly brave to take up space and be seen, celebrate ourselves, celebrate other people. I did say there was going to be more butterflies. This is my fault, because the last thing I did with this deck was butterfly focused. We've got the Magician, Growth, and the Two of Pentacles. Yes, love that. I'm very sore still at the moment, so I'm actually running out of a little steam, and I have clients soon, so I'm probably going to do less readings and just get through the other 2 pairings alongside this one. Look at that for a reading. The Five of Wands, the Five of Cups, and fear. So when emotionally we are feeling incredibly weighty and overwhelmed or not in a good space, but not only that, there's some kind of conflict going on, whether it's energetically or it's actually in partnership, there's a lot of fear. And then one more, we've got the Seven of Pentacles, Attract for Violet, and the Daughter of Wands. I feel like the Daughter of Wands is a great one for both of these, because we're starting to begin that process of experimentation and trying to find where we can really align with our passions. And the Seven speaks to that. It's like we don't get into the pages and know nothing. That's not the naivety, I feel at least, that the pages speak to. That's not how I view them. You know, very rarely do we ever know nothing. We've always got something to bring to the table, no matter how young we are. Young minds are fascinating in themselves. So there's something about having a certain amount of experience, but really needing to continue in the way that we have and really utilize that and step towards honing that even more and attracting what we're trying to propagate. Yeah, love that. I definitely will read these 2 together at some stage. This is the very new Peculiar Pathways, which, if you haven't already seen my video on it, I have discussed this lovely new deck. And I have already used these together as well and really enjoyed them. So we're going to skip on past this one and get into the rest. The Devil for Love and the Four of Coins, which is a really interesting, what's the word that I want? Contrast of layers of the devil between like the sensuality and the love and the more like lust, but really having like a desire for something. And how much we hold on to things where it goes beyond the point of it being healthy for us. And it feels like that's a discussion here as well. You know, are we identifying something as love and it's not? Or how does that show up? I don't know. I feel like the devil is all too often considered just bad in that very Christianized context. And again, doesn't feel like the fullness of the archetype for me. Here we've got the Hermit, enjoy, right, okay, the Tower. I'm like, enjoy the Tower? Might be very, very necessary. I don't have any bad feelings towards the cards, but I don't know about enjoying it mid-process, but actually then I think enjoy maybe the message is, again, to come into the Hermit a little more whilst the Tower is going on. You know, that process has already started, is already in motion, often out of our control perhaps as well, not necessarily initiated by us. What can we restore? What can we render? How can that be restorative for us? And it's another time where if people were to use the guidebook, it may be that they find something else out about strawberries, or they may already have something else and the keyword might not have even been enjoy. You know, that might not have been the focal point. It could have been something else about strawberry. So we've got the Wheel of Fortune for abundance and the Eight of Coins. So this does feel like it's pulling on that luck element of the Wheel of Fortune inherently. Like this, for me, it reads as the Wheel of Fortune is in a really good space right now. And that, along with the 8 of coins and the layers of mastery, because this is a very Rider-Waite-Smith deck, it's why the beavers are in the mastery as well, because they are absolute, yeah, just honed their craft unbelievably so. And so they are abundant in that knowledge, in that experience. They are able to, when allowed to and safe to do so, which is a different matter, create abundant environments for themselves and the rest of us as well. So the wheel is turning in their favour. One thing I would take from this is that we recently in the UK did an update on our beaver numbers because we've been trying to re-establish them, and the numbers come back that more had been spotted in the wild and some have successfully bred. So for me, this almost speaks to that as well on a very personal level, which I'm really excited for. So we have the Hanged Man, Watchfulness, and the King of Cups. And here in the crane is holding an eyeball. I'm just going to leave you with that. I love that inclusion. Here, ooh, we're going on an adventure, because when we leave something in the 8 of Cups, although it's not inherently bad and we've emotionally been connected to it and perhaps it's been a really rich experience for us, it's no longer putting us in the same space, and that time to move forward, it speaks to the adventure of being in a different space mentally, and I mean in this instance being in perhaps a far better place in which we can think clearly, communicate from clarity is the thing that comes through from these. We've got the 8 of Wands repelling the 10 of Wands. Awesome. I understand. We've got the 10 of Coins, Endurance, and the 3 of Wands. So perhaps whilst we've been in this space for a while, there's going to be a shift. And so it's pulling upon this space, the resources that we had from this, you know, the abundance that's available to us already, because that's going to help endure for this next venture. And I love that these are seabirds, right? Terns? Yeah, seabirds, shorebirds. So it feels very fitting. I sat up for 5 seconds to do this last one and the cat jumped in my seat. So now we're sharing. She is probably going to meow. I'm not going to stick around for too much longer. Please bear with. Last up, the deck pairing, another experimental, not tried in practice one, is the beautiful French deck that a lot more seem to be becoming familiar with now, which I'm so excited for. Well, I'm really sad that the creator seems to no longer be on socials. At least I can't find her anymore. But anyway, this is the French deck, which translatable is arguably Strange Branches, Strange Antlers. Actually, once in discussion with me, she said Strange Sprouts. So make of that what you will. We've got the 4 of Cups, Stabilize, and the 8 of Cups. So what can we pull upon? I suppose the core things that we want to hold on to, that we're invested in, that really are important to us, that fill our cups when we move from the 8. It's almost like we're paring down, and that's the stabilization. We've got the 10 of Pentacles, Enhance, and we've got the Devil again. Can you not scratch my chair, please? Zuri is embodying the devil, but in the naughty way. In naughty but fun. I mean, she's having a blast scratching away at the back of my chair. Then we've got the 10 of Wands, Adversity, and the 3 of Swords. Which I think when you go through this reading as well, and if this was your reading and it's like, wow, this is where I'm at, and yes, I understand that, it would be really great to see how marshmallow can maybe be of use. If you're someone who works with something medicinally or uses plants edibly, depending on where this falls, because I don't know, I'm not that familiar with this one. Or if there was something ritualistically and in your craft that you could utilise as a part of working with this, as well as just every other kind of day ways that we engage with moving through stuff. So here we have the 𝗲𝘁𝗍, which I'm not sure if the pronunciation's very good, but essentially this is our Page of Wands with fertility and the world. And this couldn't look more fertile if it wanted. So I feel like this energy very much aligns with rabbit as a whole as well. It's like the two aspects of how I perceive rabbit if I was going to be like really elemental and get into their associations. I love that. And the ferns around them are cute. And then here I don't know how to pronounce this one, but this is the King of Cups, sorry. We've got a lot of blue going on here. So we've got the King of Cups, nourish, and as above this one is, because there's also as above, so below, essentially. That's the essence of how I understand them in the deck, and I do keep them in. So the emotional and intuitive realms, and which feels like the as above in some ways, if we're going to use it that way, sort of nourishing us. Oh, subduing the moon through the Three of Pentacles. Although this is just giving me go out and do a witchy ritual, especially if you can find other people to do it with, because far more fun. And so you'll notice we had rabbit and we had hare, which I also appreciate in this deck. And we've got the Ace of Pentacles and the Emperor for rebirth. Oof, yes. Especially all of the earthy stuff going on here. And then last one, because I really do need to go and stretch and have a drink of water, we have the Nine of Wands, Strength, and the Seven of Cups. I feel like strength is very, very useful for us and vital when we're in the space between these two in particular, because there's something quite wonderful about the space of the Seven of Cups, but also on reflection, sometimes something quite overwhelming as well. It's almost like it reminds me of when I've been peopling a lot and I'm quite introverted. So sometimes the Seven of Cups feels kind of adjacent to that, albeit not the same. And then the process of getting into that final push with the Nine of Wands again speaks to me really of that determination that we can pull upon through strength and the courage of 𝗼𝘁𝗍, or at least what we perceive to be courage. So yeah, I mean, they're pretty fierce when they want to be, right? So there you have it. They are my preferred or tested or tester pairings. I'd love to know which one was your favourite, because I'm nosy and I'm a big kid. So yeah, I'm going to go feed her, stretch. I hope that you have found this wildly enjoyable, if nothing else, and I will see you all again soon. Bye.